The chamber hummed with quiet conversation, a low murmur of voices layered atop one another like an uneasy tide. The Galactic Council's great hall, vast, domed, and illuminated by suspended orbs of pale blue light, was accustomed to debates, treaties, and endless deliberations. What it was not accustomed to was the presence of a human standing at its center, staring up at the assembled representatives with an expression that was neither pleading nor aggressive. It was something worse. It was absolute certainty. The human diplomat, Ambassador Reynolds, stood straight-backed, hands clasped behind him, exuding the kind of calm that made predators hesitate. He did not glance around nervously as many species did when addressing the council. He did not hesitate. His voice, when he spoke, carried not just through the hall's acoustics but into the minds of those who heard it, carving itself into memory like a blade etching into stone. Asterisk. One of you attacked our home. Asterisk. The words fell into the air like a dropped weapon. The murmurs ceased instantly, as if sound itself had recoiled from the weight of the statement. The council chamber, filled with delegates from over 100 starfaring civilizations, had witnessed countless grievances over the cycles. But none had begun with such an accusation, delivered not as a question, not as an appeal, but as an undeniable fact. Silence stretched. The kind that scraped against nerves. Then movement, a flicker of unease across alien features, subtle shifts in posture, the twitch of a tendril, the retraction of a mandible. Among the gathered species, reactions varied. Some wore confusion, their expressions suggesting genuine ignorance. Others stiffened, their bodies betraying the flicker of recognition, of knowledge they had not yet admitted to possessing. A member of the Authari delegation, a race known for their long, sinuous forms and layered chitin, leaned forward, the polished plates of their exoskeleton catching the ambient glow of the chamber. Their mandibles clicked twice, the sound oddly sharp in the stillness. Clarify your statement, Ambassador. This is a serious claim. Reynolds did not blink. I require no clarification. One of you attacked a Terran colony. Unprovoked. Civilian casualties. And now you sit here, expecting the privilege of neutrality. The weight of his words pressed against the chamber, heavy and immovable. From the upper tiers, a delegate from the Sorhun Dominion, a feline-like species known for their cunning, tilted their head, golden eyes narrowing. Humans have many colonies. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding. Or an unfortunate skirmish? Reynolds finally moved. A slow, deliberate step forward. Do not insult me. Do not insult my people. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. It was the absence of emotion that sent a chill through the room. This was no skirmish. No border dispute. No accident. A flick of his fingers, and the projection system embedded in the chamber floor activated. The air distorted, then resolved into an image above him, a ruined colony, jagged steel and shattered domes, blackened earth. The remains of structures, crushed under the weight of orbital bombardment. Bodies. The feed was high resolution, the kind that left no room for denial. It was not the after-effect of a battle. It was extermination. A ripple passed through the assembly. Even those indifferent to human affairs could recognize the brutality displayed. There were rules, even in war. This was a massacre. A sharp exhalation came from the Gorvath delegate, a reptilian species that prided itself on discipline. Who did this? Their voice, a deep rumble, carried more anger than concern. Reynolds turned slightly, his gaze sweeping the gathered representatives. That is why I am here. I already know who. Again, that uneasy shifting. The question, Reynolds continued, is whether the Council will uphold its own laws. Or if we must handle this ourselves. That final sentence sent a visible ripple through the room. A representative from the Valtari Commonwealth, a species known for their bureaucratic efficiency, cleared his throat, his pale blue skin paling further. Ambassador, I must remind you that unilateral action without proper council approval. You misunderstand. Reynolds interrupted, voice like steel against ice. I am not asking for permission. I am giving you the opportunity to enforce your own principles before we do it for you. That did it. The tension crystallized into something more tangible. The unspoken truth behind his words was clear. The humans were not here as petitioners. They were not here for negotiation. They were here to see who among the council had the spine to stand by the very laws they claimed to uphold. The accused would be named soon. Everyone could feel it. A whisper from the back, barely audible, but present. One of the lesser representatives muttered to their neighbor. The humans were supposed to be. Reynolds cut in smoothly. Supposed to be what? New? Weak? Temporary? He turned his gaze to the speaker, who shrank back. Do not mistake our patience for passivity. Do not mistake our silence for submission. We are not here to be tolerated. We are here because we have earned our place among you. And now, one of you has tried to erase us. A slow exhale. That was a mistake. At last, movement from the accused. A shift in their delegation stance, the faintest ripple of fear. Reynolds saw it. Marked it. And knew that, very soon, their name would be the one spoken aloud before the council. Humanity had been tested. And now, it was time for answers. The silence that followed was a living thing, stretching through the chamber, wrapping itself around throats, tightening its grip. The accused had been marked, not by name, not yet, but by the subtle betrayals of body language. A stiffened posture. A glance too quick to avert. The shallow, controlled breathing of those suddenly aware they were being watched. Reynolds had seen it before. The moment the guilty realized their secrets were no longer safe. He allowed the silence to linger just long enough to settle into their bones before speaking again. You know who you are, he said, voice steady. And now, so does everyone else. A flick of his wrist, and the projection shifted. The devastation of the colony faded, replaced by something more damning. Intercepted transmissions, fragmented at first, then reconstructing into full clarity. Warships, their hulls unmistakable, moving in formation. Tactical logs. Energy signatures. A fleet mobilizing with precision. This was not a rogue act of piracy. This was sanctioned. Planned. The name of the perpetrators appeared in bold, luminous text across the chamber. The Thalzar Dominion. A hiss rippled through the council, a mixture of disbelief and inevitability. The Thalzar, an empire with a history of expansion masked beneath layers of diplomacy, sat motionless in their delegation seats. Their representative, a heavy-set being with dark, insectoid plating, lifted his chin ever so slightly. This is an exaggeration, he said, the deep resonance of his voice carefully measured. A misunderstanding. We did not intend for this to escalate. You did not intend to be caught. Reynolds cut in without hesitation. The Thalzar ambassador's mandibles flexed, but he did not refute it. Because it was true. Reynolds stepped forward. Do you think we wouldn't notice? His eyes locked onto the ambassador's. Do you think we wouldn't remember? A pause. Controlled. Calculated. Your ships did not arrive by accident. Your weapons did not fire by mistake. You knew what you were doing. You chose a target you thought was weak. A colony, not a fortress. A settlement, not a fleet. You believed humanity would not act. That we would not risk war over a single world. He let the words sink in before delivering the inevitable conclusion. You were wrong. A slow, deliberate turn of his head. But what about the rest of you? He asked, sweeping his gaze across the chamber. The Council prides itself on order, on governance, on the rule of law. Tell me, what is the punishment for an unprovoked attack on a fellow member species? No one answered. They all knew the law. The very foundation of the Council was built upon the promise of mutual protection, of consequences for those who broke that trust. And yet, those same laws had never truly been tested against an empire like the Thalzar. Reynolds' voice carried no anger, no desperation, only certainty. You see the evidence. The question now is whether you will enforce your own decrees, or whether the laws you claim to uphold are nothing more than words on a dying breath. Shifts in posture. Some were afraid. Others were intrigued. A few were weighing their options. The Sorhun representative, The feline-eyed diplomat from before cleared her throat delicately. Humanity is still relatively new to the Council, she said carefully. Surely you understand that diplomatic channels must be explored before. Before what? Reynolds turned toward her. Before consequences are issued? Before the guilty are held accountable? Tell me, Counselor, if this had been your world, would you still advocate for patience? The sword hun fell silent. Reynolds pressed on. Or is this hesitation because it was only a human colony? The accusation landed like a physical blow. We have seen the records, Reynolds continued, relentless now. When the Thalzar encroached on Valtari space, the Council sanctioned them within a cycle. When they threatened Authari trade routes, restrictions were imposed immediately. But now, when it is a Terran world burning, you ask us to wait? A slow exhale. Understand this. We are not here to beg. We are not here to ask for justice like a child asking for mercy. He straightened. We are here to see whether the Council is worth the air it breathes. The room shifted, the power dynamic tilting, subtle but undeniable. The humans had entered this chamber as an emerging power, a species still viewed by many as young, as untested. That illusion was gone now. The Thalzar ambassador exhaled, mandibles clicking, the weight of his predicament pressing against him like a physical force. You are making threats, he said at last. No, Reynolds said evenly. I am making statements. Silence. The Thalzar representative glanced toward the others, searching for support. None came. The Council had seen the evidence. They had heard the words spoken in unshaken conviction. And they knew, deep down, that the humans were no longer a species to be dismissed. You have a choice, Reynolds said, voice quiet, controlled. A simple one. Either the Council acts, or we will. The room, already tense, seemed to freeze entirely. He let it linger, then turned, walking back toward the central podium. We are not asking for war, he said, almost conversationally. But if war is what is required, then let it be known humanity does not lose. He stopped. Looked back once. This is your chance to prove you still matter. Do not waste it. The chamber sat in stunned silence as Reynolds took his seat, waiting for the Council to decide whether it would uphold its own laws or fade into irrelevance. The Council chamber remained locked in silence, the weight of the moment pressing against every being present. Some whispered among themselves, careful not to let their voices carry. Others sat motionless, their thoughts churning behind unreadable expressions. Every eye flicked toward the central podium, toward the humans, toward Reynolds. No one wanted to be the first to speak, the first to commit. Finally, the Council head, an ancient being whose tenure had seen empires rise and fall, leaned forward. His voice, though worn by centuries of diplomacy, carried undeniable authority. We acknowledge the weight of your claim, Ambassador Reynolds, he said, measured and deliberate. The evidence presented is substantial. But the question before us is not only one of guilt. It is one of response. Reynolds met the old diplomat's gaze without flinching. Then respond. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, some bristling at the directness, others intrigued by it. The old way had always been deliberation, drawn-out proceedings designed to buy time, to maneuver. Humanity had no interest in playing that game. A delegate from the Koros coalition, a race known for their meticulous adherence to procedure, spoke up. If we are to impose sanctions, there must be formal investigations. Committees. Reviews. We cannot rush into. Reynolds didn't let him finish. And while you drown in bureaucracy, how many more colonies will burn? The Koros delegate stiffened, caught between protocol and the undeniable reality laid before them. The Council had seen the evidence. There was no need for an investigation. The attack had happened. The only question was what they would do about it. Another voice, deeper and richer with experience, cut through the tension. And what, precisely, is humanity's expectation? The speaker was a representative of the Vartel Dominion, a species that had, in their own time, been forced to fight for their survival. They understood the gravity of the moment better than most. Reynolds didn't hesitate. We expect what was promised. The same response any council member would receive in our place. The same response you all agreed upon when this council was formed. The old council head watched him carefully. You realize, of course, that action against the Thalzar would lead to open conflict. Reynolds exhaled, slow and steady. Then let there be conflict. A sharp inhale from several delegations. The weight of that statement was not lost on anyone. Even the Thalzar ambassador, who had remained mostly silent since the accusations, narrowed his compound eyes. Do you understand what you're proposing, human? His voice was controlled, but the edge was undeniable. War with my people would be costly. We have resources, fleets, alliances. So do we. It wasn't a boast. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. The Thalzar ambassador's mandibles twitched. For so long, humanity had been regarded as an upstart species, one that had gained its seat at the table through resilience, ambition, and sheer tenacity. But now, standing before the assembled powers of the galaxy, they were revealing a truth many had refused to acknowledge. Humanity was ready. The council head folded his hands together, gaze shifting between the Thalzar and Reynolds. The council does not make decisions lightly. If action is taken, it will set a precedent, one that will ripple far beyond this incident. He paused. Are you prepared for that? Reynolds nodded. Are you? A heavy silence followed. For centuries, the council had existed as a governing body, its laws and regulations intended to prevent conflicts before they began. It was a system built on the assumption that no species would dare defy the collective will of the galaxy. But that assumption had already been shattered. The Thalzar had attacked, believing they could act without consequence. The council now had to decide whether it would enforce its own laws or watch them crumble under the weight of inaction. The representative of the Rehari, a cold and calculating species known for their strategic pragmatism, spoke next. Let us assume, for a moment, that the council does act. That we impose military intervention, trade embargoes, whatever response is deemed appropriate. What then? Humanity has made its stance clear, but what is the ultimate goal? Reynolds met his gaze. Deterrence. Deterrence? We are not here to conquer. We are not here to demand tributes or carve out an empire. We are here to make one thing very clear. He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. If you strike at our people, we will strike back. And the next species that considers doing what the Thalzar have done will think twice. The Redhari delegate studied him for a long moment before giving a slow, approving nod. The council head sighed. This is no simple matter. But you are right about one thing, Ambassador Reynolds. His gaze swept across the chamber. If we do nothing, we prove that our laws are meaningless. More murmurs. This time, there was a shift. A realization. The council had long prided itself on maintaining order. It was a balancing act, a delicate structure held together by trust. And now, for the first time in its existence, it faced the prospect of proving whether that trust was deserved. The Thalzar ambassador, realizing the tide was turning, attempted one last desperate maneuver. If the council moves against us, we will retaliate. This will not end with simple sanctions. Reynolds didn't so much as blink. Then I hope you're ready. No posturing. No threats. Just a calm certainty that sent a shiver through the chamber. The Thalzar had miscalculated. They had expected outrage, certainly. Anger, maybe even grief. But not this. Not a species willing to meet them, not with rage, but with cold, measured resolve. The council had straightened. Then the decision must be made. A vote would follow. The outcome was not yet certain, but the winds had shifted. Even those who had once hesitated now understood the truth. The galaxy was changing, and humanity would not be ignored. The vote was cast. The decision was made. The council chambers, once filled with the hum of deliberation, now sat in uneasy silence. The verdict was clear: sanctions, military intervention, and full enforcement of council law against the Thalzar dominion. The moment the announcement was made, the atmosphere changed. Delegates who had been hesitant moments before now whispered hurriedly among themselves, calculating the repercussions. Some saw opportunity in the chaos, alliances to be strengthened, rival powers to be weakened. Others felt the creeping dread of inevitable conflict. But none could deny the reality. The council had acted. Reynolds sat unmoving, absorbing the moment. This was what humanity had demanded, what they had been prepared to enforce themselves if necessary. And yet, he knew this was only the beginning. The decision was made, but the real battle had yet to start. Across the chamber, the Thalzar ambassador seethed. His once measured composure had fractured, the tension in his rigid stance betraying his anger. His mandibles clicked once before he finally spoke. "You have made a mistake," he said, his voice low, venomous. "You believe yourselves safe under the protection of council decrees. You believe that these laws, these words, hold power over the realities of war." His compound eyes locked onto Reynolds. "You are wrong." Reynolds didn't respond immediately. He let the words settle, let the ambassador feel the weight of his own fury before answering. "The mistake wasn't ours," he said evenly. "It was yours. You assumed we would cower. That we would hesitate. That we would be like the others you've bullied into submission." He leaned forward slightly. "You underestimated us." The Thalzar ambassador let out a sharp, chittering breath. "Then we will see how long your defiance lasts when war consumes your worlds." A murmur rippled through the chamber, but Reynolds only gave a slight nod. "Then you'll learn just how far we are willing to go." With that, the Thalzar delegation rose from their seats. There would be no more discussion, no more diplomacy. The time for words had passed. They left the chamber without another glance, their decision made as surely as the council's. Reynolds turned back to face the assembled delegates. "You've made the right choice," he stated, scanning their faces. "But understand this, humanity will not wait for the council to act at its own pace. If these sanctions do not yield results, if the Thalzar continue their aggression, we will respond. With or without your approval." No one challenged him. They all understood. The moment the meeting adjourned, the diplomatic couriers began their work. Messages were sent across the known galaxy. Some alliances solidified, others fractured. The Thalzar, once seen as a formidable power, were now exposed. And humanity had sent a message that would not be forgotten. As Reynolds left the chamber, his mind was already moving ahead. The battle lines had been drawn. Now, it was time to prepare. The war began before the ink had dried on the council's ruling. Within hours of the Thalzar delegation's departure, their forces moved. Trade convoys vanished along disputed borders. Long-range surveillance stations went silent. Key hyperspace lanes leading toward human space saw sudden accidents, freighters destroyed by so-called navigational failures, patrols disappearing without distress calls. The Thalzar were sending a message. Humanity responded in kind. The first sign of human action wasn't an official declaration, nor a grand military movement. It was a blockade, silent, methodical, absolute. The Thalzar supply lines, once flowing freely through neutral corridors, found themselves choked off by warships bearing the Terran insignia. Merchant vessels were turned away. Fuel shipments vanished. Critical resources from their outer colonies never reached their core worlds. Then, the raids began. They came without warning. Precision strikes against Thalzar military outposts, listening stations, fuel depots. Human forces moved with ruthless efficiency, hitting hard, fading away before retaliation could even be mounted. It wasn't a war of attrition, it was control. Every engagement was a lesson, every attack, a consequence. The Thalzar, accustomed to overwhelming force, struggled to adjust. Their fleets were built for planetary sieges, drawn-out conflicts where sheer numbers dictated victory. But humanity was not engaging them on those terms. They didn't fight for territory. They fought for leverage. Council space watched in stunned silence. The expectation had been that humanity would struggle, that their fleet, smaller, less experienced, would suffer under the weight of a galactic power. But that assumption had been flawed from the beginning. Humanity didn't fight fair. Infiltrators struck at the Thalzar's command structure, severing communication between frontline units and their leaders. Cyber warfare teams dismantled their logistical networks, turning their own supply chains into vulnerabilities. Diplomats worked in the shadows, quietly cutting off Thalzar alliances, turning former partners into reluctant observers. And then came the final blow. A single broadcast, sent across all Council frequencies. A recording intercepted from the Thalzar's own high command. A conversation never meant to be heard outside their war rooms. Humanity was meant to be a warning, the Thalzar strategist had said, voice filled with disdain. A lesson to the Council that their rules do not apply to us. If they will not kneel, then we will break them. Their colonies, their fleets, their worlds, everything they hold dear will burn. The weight of those words shattered any remaining illusions. This was never about a misunderstanding, never about border disputes or territorial claims. This was extermination. The Council could no longer pretend neutrality. Sanctions turned into full-scale military backing. Member species who had once hesitated now moved against the Thalzar. Trade embargoes became blockades. Economic pressure became direct intervention. And humanity? Humanity did not stop. Their fleets pressed deeper into Thalzar space, not in conquest, but in dismantlement. Every shipyard, every supply depot, every factory that fueled the war machine was methodically eliminated. The Thalzar found themselves on the defensive, not just against humans, but against a galaxy that now saw them as a threat. Their empire, once feared, was now isolated. Their fleets, once unstoppable, were now scattered. Their power, once absolute, had been shattered by the very species they had thought too young, too weak, too insignificant to stand against them. In the final days of the war, as human warships surrounded their homeworld, a single message was transmitted across all channels. It came from Reynolds, standing in the same council chamber where the war had begun. "You thought we would break," he said, voice calm, measured. "You thought we would beg. That we would accept our fate as just another species to be crushed under your heel." He paused. "You were wrong." The war ended not with surrender, but with a reckoning. The Thalzar leadership was dismantled, their empire fractured, their influence erased. And humanity? Humanity had proven its place in the galaxy. Not through conquest. Not through dominance. But through the simple, undeniable truth that had been made clear to all. They would not be broken. They would not be ignored. And they would never, ever kneel.